Hey guys, Jean here. So this is the first time I've recorded something on this channel. So it's also, I thought it would be cool if I did a reading of a fanfiction because I've never done it before and I always thought it was pretty cool. And so I figured, why don't I try it out? It took me a while to find this one, but I think you guys will really like it, and I think it has a unique theme and all that stuff. I also decided that I'd do some art along with it because I saw another fanfiction reading do that. It's actually the only one I've ever seen. It was for something for Voltron. So I figured I could do the same type of thing. So then I get to do some art while reading some fan fiction. It's basically heaven for most people. I'm not the best drawer. I'm just giving you a hint that I'm going into high school, so I'm not the greatest. I'm not like one of those art prodigies, but I do really like art, and I feel like, this would be something fun to do. Okay. And I feel this would be good for the channel, have something like this. I could do it for other themes too. If there's a certain fandom you want me to do, comment it. Maybe I'll do it. I probably won't do it if I'm not already a part of or previously a part of it. So just keep that in mind. I'll link in the description what I have and what I have, or what fandoms I have an interest in, or would have an interest in doing. And if you do, just link the fanfiction you'd like me to do too. That would also help me out, get a better idea of what you guys want. But first I'm finishing this one before thinking about anything else. How to Survive the Apocalypse Without Coffee by Trashton. How to survive in 2 easy steps. 1. Suffer. Then 2. Don't. Chapter 1. Step 1. Max used to be in the Little League baseball team as a kid. His dad liked it, though he never came to any of his games. And he liked it because he got to get out of the house more often. Staying in that house was fucking awful, and Max would do anything to get out of there. When the virus came around, his dad was struck down by it. If he were more like a dad than he was, that is, checking up on his son more than once a week, Max was sure he would have caught it too. He's sure he would have caught it if his shitty-ass school wasn't on break. The last time the TV actually worked, he saw the world had entered an international emergency. Billions were infected and millions were dying. Researchers were searching for a cure as fast as possible. Soon after the electricity shut off, his dad passed away. It was the dead of winter, and he had no chance against the cold with his already weakened immune system. Max threw a blanket over him, and when he discovered his father, hospitals weren't accepting new patients anymore. I mean, he was dead. The morgue wasn't open, and either way, how was he to communicate with them that his father had died? The phone had stopped working days ago, so this had to do. Max definitely didn't cry. Why would he care if he was dead? He didn't care. He didn't care about him. He didn't cry. He didn't cry. Max didn't leave his father's house. He didn't have anywhere to go anyway. His relatives were all resided in India and most likely were dead by now. He locked the door in the basement and called that. Max was good at preserving food. His dad didn't go out for anything but work to buy alcohol, or when he noticed the fridge was completely empty, which, mind you, would sometimes not be for weeks. Max always smuggled some stuff from the school home and hid it in his room. There was enough preservation in those things. They would last into the next century. Despite his attempts to ration out his food, by a month after Max's dad had passed, his source was almost completely depleted. Max was down to eating maybe a pack of animal crackers a day. Max was just thanking whatever higher being that their water pump was not electric, or else he knew he would be fucked right now. Now that Max didn't have anything better to do, and in order to preserve energy, he brought all of his stuff downstairs into the living room. It wasn't like he owned much, but anything he moved, he brought. He brought his 3DS, which had still impossibly a little charged, the one baseball bat he owned, his pillows, his blanket, his ukulele, which he learned to stay out of the house yet again, his book bag, and finally, Mr. Honeynuts. The stuffed bear, though Max would never admit it, was his prized possession. He slept with the bear beside him, usually hugging up to it. It was ragged, but that's what made it all the better. He dumped all his books out of his book bag and debated on satiating his boredom by reading them. No, the day he would willingly read those books would be the day he died. When it got cold that night, he threw those books in a small blaze inside the fireplace to keep warm. Max jolted awake when he heard a loud thud from somewhere. He grabbed onto the bear with one hand and the baseball bat with another. He heard a loud groan coming from the basement. Max's heart beat against his ribcage. Everything in him was telling him to run, but his fucking curiosity was burning like the fire inside the fireplace, which, really by now, was mostly embers. Max picked up his backpack and stuffed his bear in there, some food in a water bottle. Max planned on running, but louder than the roar of his blood was the thunk, thunk, thunk of the wood behind the basement door. Max was frozen in place, unsure of what to do. Of course, this was the beginning of every shitty horror movie, but in this situation, it was weird. Max didn't know why, but he had to know what was behind the door. Max grasped the bat tightly and walked towards the basement, trying to His curiosity was completely satiated. As a matter of fact, Max felt like he could puke from the sudden overload of information. Oh, and more importantly, the stench. The stench of the month-old rotting corpse of his dead father staggering in front of him. It was like his dad didn't notice him. Max held up his bat. His mind was running a million miles a minute. He couldn't decipher a thing that was being screamed through his mind. His father's eyes finally met his. His father lunged, taking off in a dead sprint towards Max. Max dodged, and his father ran into the wall behind him. Max was sure how he was breathing wasn't good for him. When his father turned and ran towards him again, Max swung the bat as hard as he could. He winced at the feeling of what used to be his dad's skull cracking under the wooden bat. His father stumbled backwards, but was still standing. Max took the first lunge, terrified for his life. He drew back and swung at his father again. The reanimated corpse crumbled to the floor. Max couldn't stop himself. He raised the bat over his head and brought it down on his head. Once. Twice. 3 times. Max snapped into his senses when he heard the shatter behind him. Max jumped 3 feet into the air. He looked around, but finally spotted what shattered. The only family picture there was of his family before it all went to shit. His mom stood, holding a toddler of him, and his father held onto her, his arms wrapped around her and his baby. Max picked up the shattered frame. A frame went across his mother's and father's face. Max looked back over to his dad. His skull was caved in and he didn't move 1 inch. He was dead. He was already dead, you shithead. What the fuck was that then? What the fuck was that then? What the fuck? Max felt the static come back to his skull. Max couldn't sort through his thoughts. All he knew was that he had to get out of there. He killed his dad. No, he didn't. He was dead before. He killed him again. The cops would be there soon. No, the cops were gone. The law enforcement was gone. The fights in the streets that went on for weeks before the evidence of that. But now, as Max noticed, everything was silent. Silent, silent, silent. Max would listen to his father's shouts over this silence. He'd listen to the screaming and fighting in the streets rather than this silence. He'd listen to his dad's, a lifeless corpse, moan rather than this silence. Because then, there was something. Now there's only this silence, this static, and this picture of his family. His dead family. Max pried the frame off the photo. It cut his hands a little, but he got it out with minimal blood loss. He had to get out of there. Right fucking now. Max stuffed the photo in his hoodie pocket and grabbed onto the blood-covered bat. The boy stepped over the corpse's body and pushed the door open. He jogged into the dead of night. Chapter 2. Step 2. Max had seen TV shows and movies based on the topic when he scrolled through the channel guide. All the zombies were slow and incompetent. These couldn't be zombies in life. The corpses were fast and strong, but still stupid. If they were smart, Max shivered. He didn't want to think about how many times he would be dead right now. Max shivered in the forest behind his house. His hoodie wasn't doing much to contain heat in the cold winter air. He curled in on himself. Max wanted to sleep, but he knew he couldn't. Even if the cold wasn't a thing, he'd never be able to sleep. His mind wouldn't clear. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his dad's caved-in skull. Max counted the pine needles on the tree around him until the sun finally came up over the horizon. Max felt more safe, if that was even possible, going out during the day. Maybe he'd be able to scavenge some sort of food. He continuously thought of going back to his house, but he told himself not to. It was probably leaking with zombies now. Max huffed. He'd just have to steal. It wasn't like his delinquent ass hasn't stole before, but now it wasn't like anyone would care. But it felt weird and wrong. God, what's wrong with me? He slid down the tree as carefully as he could and landed in a dew-covered ground of the forest. Max forced himself to be as silent as possible, though he wanted to do nothing else than scream and make as much sound as possible. Max was a stubborn son of a bitch, and he would not go silently in the night. He'd go silently into the day. Well, never fucking mind. Max tightened his grip on the bat, which he thought would be impossible once he reached down. Max saw a few moving blobs in the near distance, but his stomach growl forced him forward. His throat was parched as well, and he knew thirst was an avid killer. Max gritted his teeth. Once the city began to form more clear shapes, he could hear more moans. The moans were increasing in frequency and loudness, and Max's fists were paler than the moon. As Max made his way to the gas station, he had to run away from a few of the corpses. Max wouldn't have dared to try that last night. But now, though they spotted him, they couldn't run. Max rationalized that it was just that they couldn't run during the day. Max didn't want to chance it, though. Max pushed the door open into the gas station. It was very run down from years of wear and tear, but also the few days, weeks, months maybe, of this apocalypse. It was obviously ransacked, and Max knew his way into the bedroom. As he unlocked the door, he grasped onto the bat hard. Nonetheless, his heart leaped when he heard a groan in the metal door creak open. Max raised it, prepared for a fight. When the door was fully open, he almost felt bad. Sitting there, trapped under a shelf, was a disheveled ex-worker of the establishment. Max couldn't tell if she starved when it fell on her, or if she died on impact. Nonetheless, she was pinned and couldn't move. Max glanced around to move. He avoided the reaching grasp of the woman and got over to the supply shelf. Just out of the woman's reach was a pack of water bottles and some dry noodles, and a small assortment of candy and chips. He frowned, but still grabbed the goods and stuffed them in his bag, leaving it unzipped since all of it wouldn't fit inside. The shelf started to scrape against the floor as the corpse began to drag it with her. Max decided now would be a good time to get out of the building. He shut the door behind him, gave a quick glance through the store, finding a few more meager supplies, first aid and some canned meat, and rushed out of the door. Max wanted to make it back to his safe spot with plenty of time to spare. Max passed his old neighborhood as he was making his way back into the forest. There were no zombies around, and it seemed safe for the time being. Max did still need supplies, like to have a shelter. It wasn't like he would go back after this, and it was only barely noon. If the sun said anything, there were no risks, right? Max's body wandered down into his house. Door thankfully closed. Max opened the door to see dry blood crack over the wood paneling, and his father's corpse splayed across the floor. Max gently dodged it and ran upstairs to grab another bag so he could carry more stuff. Max scavenged the house, bringing around anything useful to the kitchen. In the end, he had his DS, the rest of the food and water in the house, even more first aid supplies, and stitching supplies, old clothing, a tool set, an axe, a small tent, a flashlight, and his ukulele. Max knew he couldn't fit it all inside his bag, and he groaned. He'd have to make another trip or awkwardly trapeze back into his safe haven, leaving himself vulnerable to attacks. So make 2 trips it is. Max huffed. He stuffed the second bag with the necessities. That is, with the axe, the tent, his DS, the first aid, and the flashlight, and his ukulele. Max put one strap on each shoulder to try to even the weight, but he was still usually leaned to one side rather than the other. Max stepped over the corpse and went back outside, preparing to travel back into the forest. Max felt ice fill his veins when he noticed the sun was much further down the sky than he previously thought. He choked. He'd have to come back tomorrow to get the stuff. It would be dark soon. Max rushed into the forest, letting himself find the innermost tree of the forest. He knew the forest rather well, if he didn't say so himself. Max dropped the bags onto the soil, rolling his sleeves. He pulled out the folded-up tent and began to set up the spikes and such to put up the tent. The sun went down as he finished putting it up, and he placed the flashlight down in the tent to light up the area, but not attract much. Max shoved his bags into the tent. Max sat there for a moment and eventually came out with food, water, and his bat and climbed into the tree. He didn't feel safe on the ground. Max snacked on some potted meat and a few crackers. It was honestly the closest thing he had to meat in maybe a month, and it tasted heavenly since he hadn't had anything to eat in a day or 2. Max was content. The day had exhausted the young boy, since he hadn't slept much the night before. Max knew he wasn't a person who moved in his sleep, but the distance from here to Earth was still worrying, especially with flesh-eating monsters around. But despite this, with a full belly, an exhausted belly, Max drifted off into a light sleep, semi-waking him every time there was a noise made, but sleep nonetheless. Well, okay guys, that's gonna be it for this part. I hope you guys like the little doodles that came along with it. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys want more of this. If you do, feel free to comment down below, give me a like, maybe even a little subscribe if you want to see more. And just know that, just tell me that so I know that I should continue doing this, or if anybody likes it, or if I should try other stuff, But I had a lot of fun reading this. I feel like I'm gonna have a lot of fun editing it. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening to me read this, and I will see you again.